We are at John 11, and there was a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sister sent word to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. Very interesting things happen at Bethany. It seems to be an epicenter, like Yeshua's base camp, because he goes into Jerusalem and he starts a ruckus and he goes out and he goes in and he goes out. So this is about 2 miles from Jerusalem. Simon the leper lived there. It's near the Mount of Olives. And Yeshua stayed in Bethany after meeting in the temple. He was at Simon the leper's house in Bethany when the woman put the perfume on his body, and John baptized at Bethany. And 6 days after Passover, Yeshua went here to be with Lazarus before he went to get, 6 days before Passover, he went to be with Lazarus before he went and did his final, entry. So this very important place. And we don't really know why, but I think after this chapter, we're going to know why he went and met with Lazarus, because he's probably like, what's it mean to be dead? Right? Right? Because he was about to go die, and Lazarus had already been through that. Verse 2 talks about all this stuff in the past tense. This is something I beat dead horses all the time, but the Gospels, if anybody out there is like me, when I first read the Bible, I thought these things were written in real time, that they were actual journals, and they're not. The book of John was written, some say as late as after the temple came down. I don't think it was that late, but it was 3 decades after the events transpired. So that's why the verse 2 talks about, it says, oh, this is the guy who anointed with it, and this is where this happened, this event that chronologically has not happened yet in the story. And so when Yeshua heard this, he said, the sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so the Son of God may be glorified in it. Now, he's being a little coy right there. If you heard this in real time, what would you think he just said? You think he'd say, well, that guy's not going to die. Don't worry about it. But he says it's not going to end in death, right? So he's being a little sneaky. Okay. Okay. Yeshua loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. Could you imagine having your name put into the Bible like that? Could you imagine being the disciple that Jesus loved? Could you imagine being so dear to the Messiah during his lifetime that a sentence could be put that said, Yeshua loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus? That is, I don't think it can understate how powerful and special that would be. What kind of faith did they have that he had that relationship with them early on in his ministry? Um, it's just, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it, but because we don't see these people later, right? Now they obviously had lives, and they all obviously preached the gospel, and they did what they were supposed to do with their calling, but we don't hear about them later on. And it might be interesting if someday we do find out, why they were so special. So when he heard that he was sick, Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. And the disciples said, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going to go there again? Right? You've already got them after you. And he says, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. This he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. And the disciples then said to him, well, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now, Yeshua had spoken of his death, but they thought he was speaking of literal sleep. So Yeshua told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. How would he know that? Right? How would he know that? If they didn't know it already, that means messenger didn't come and tell them. So he's dialed into something more than just the 6 or 5 senses that we all have. He's got powers that we don't really understand. But he purposely stayed there so that Lazarus could die. Now imagine being that confident in your faith in God and your faith in your abilities and imagine being like that's like, you see a trick play in football or you see a brilliant military move where they think they know what the opponent's going to do. In this case, he let his buddy die, which is kind of sad. So because he knew how it was going to turn out. And that's pretty powerful stuff. And he says, I'm glad for your sakes I was not there so that you may believe. So let's go to him. Therefore, Thomas, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us go too, so that we may die with him. Really? Right? Right? Because they're thinking that shows that Thomas is not paying attention to Lazarus at all. How did this start? The Jews are trying to kill you, right? So he's going into Judea, and Thomas is like, you know what? That's all he's thinking about is we're going to go in there and we're going to get arrested and hung or stoned or whatever. So he's not paying attention to what's going on at all. And so this is the part of the Bible where we're different than most of Christianity. Most of Christianity doesn't really believe that dead people die. They believe that dead people translate into heaven or live in some other capacity, right? Where we're the people who say that death is sleep and that people sleep until one of 2 resurrections, which will happen in the future. And so this is one of the places where we drop our anchor on that. Vani, you are off mute. What have you to say, my dear? I don't think Vani knows she's off mute. Okay. So when Yeshua came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, this is very important for later. What parallels this, right? Like a child, not a hard one, his own death and resurrection. So this entire scene is previewing what's going to happen to the Messiah. And so he's in the tomb for 4 days. And Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. Many of the Jews who had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Yeshua was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Yeshua, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Yeshua said, your brother will rise again. And she said, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. This was a big topic in the first century. The big topic was, is there a resurrection of the dead or not? Right? Because the Sadducees and the Samaritans did not believe in an afterlife. They believed that you lived and you lived today and you were faithful today and your life was either good or bad today based upon on that. And then when you died, you were just gone, like atheists in our time. They didn't have the spiritual thing that has come into Christianity, that your spirit kind of floats around, right? They didn't have that. So she's very faithful here. And maybe this is why he really likes them, because she's like, yeah, I know he's going to live again on the resurrection on the last day, which we're going to get into here in a little bit after we go through the story. And then he replies and says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And she just straight says, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, which is Messiah, the Son of God, he who comes into the world. And then he starts crying. Is he crying because one person has actually believed in him? Right? He's one person out of all of the thousands of people that he's met, that he's healed, that he's, restoring sight, restoring speech, casting out demons, all of these things that he's doing. And finally, some person who hasn't any reason to believe. Her brother's dead. He didn't show up. He just effectively disappointed her because he didn't come while he was sick, everybody knew he could heal him. And she's still saying, I believe, even in her distraught position. So this is pretty powerful stuff. So when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. When she heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Yeshua had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. That's pretty nice. That's nice. These are good people. They're all gathered around to weep over their loss of their loved one, and they're going to go with her. And Mary came to where Yeshua was. She saw him and fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Yeshua saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled, and said, where have you laid them? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And he wept. Now, this is a question that I have for you guys, and I want your input. Nobody else has talked yet, but we haven't done anything hard. But why do you think he's crying? Because you think he's crying because Lazarus is dead and he loved Lazarus? Okay. Why else could he be crying?
I think he's crying because the crowd is so morbid.
Yeah. I think there's two things going on here, right? He should not be sad that Lazarus is dead because he is not going to leave him dead. Right? Right? But the sorrow, but he still might be sad that Lazarus had to experience that for this to happen. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have my. He loves them, and he loves them as a family.
Yes, he absolutely loves these people. Yep. And I think that they have faith and they have a lot of emotion. And I think that God and Jesus look down and are sad for us. I think when we feel sadness, they feel sadness. I think they don't particularly care for our behavior. And I think that there's a lot of compassion going on here. So the Jews were saying, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind man, chat. He's possibly crying because of what he knows is soon to happen to the temple and the people who refuse to follow him. Sadducees especially. Yeah, that's another big possibility, because he was Jerusalem, you kill the prophets. He didn't want to see the millions of people who were going to get slaughtered in AD 60, AD 70. Yeah.
I think also that there's a compassion that he's feeling for the people, knowing that they're clueless, really, about what's going on and why it's all happening, and they have no hope, in fact, in their own mind.
I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, we're going to actually get to that in a little bit, because a lot of people want to be today. They want to understand prophecy. They want to know what's going to go on. They want to know everything. They want to know the details. They think they could figure it out. But the people who uttered the prophecies almost always didn't know what they were saying. These people are living it, and they don't get it until he comes back to life and explains it to them. And that's putting us kind of in our place, that stop worrying so much about, beasts and stuff like that, which we are going to get to and study, as we move on on our walks. But we aren't going to understand until he comes back and shows us. And we might not even care at that point. That's the famous song, will I, when Jesus comes back, will I dance for you, or will I fall on my face, or whatever, right? I I don't think when he comes with the legions of angels, I don't really think we're going to be worried that much about the details anymore. I'm just saying. So, um, so Yeshua, again being deeply moved within, came to the tomb, and it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Again, totally the same as his own burial. Totally the same. So Yeshua said, remove the stone. And Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench. He's been dead 4 days. Another difference between us and everybody else. Everybody else thinks that Jesus died on a Friday and was resurrected on a Sunday. We don't do it that way. He was crucified on the 14th of the month Abib and resurrected on the 17th of the month Abib, 3 days and 3 nights later. If he was only in the tomb for 18 hours, they wouldn't have believed that he died in the first place. And it also talks about Psalm 16:10, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay. So you had to be in the tomb long enough to have possibly have decayed. And Yeshua was not. Lazarus definitely was in the tomb for that long. And he stayed gone to make that happen. Yep. You were going to say something?
Yeah, the Jews as well, maybe you were going to say this yourself, but the Jews as well had this thing about you weren't really dead until after 3 days. That they thought that somehow your spirit sort of hovered over you and was anxious to come back and wouldn't actually leave the area until you were dead for 3 days. So consequently, by having him dead for 4 days, that basically nullified that particular belief that it was possible to, return or to wake up after 3 days.
Yeah, and the practical aspect is that they had probably buried some people who weren't quite dead yet. Right? Right? Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. She's talking about nail marks in the coffins when they open up mummies. Same thing with the Romans and the gladiators. The gladiators would if their only way out of it was death. So they might pretend to die. So when they were preparing the loser gladiators for burial, they stabbed them to make sure that they were dead. So you were going to say something?
Yeah, slightly different note. I just kind of thought about how early in the story Jesus had told everybody that he will not. This story does not end in death with Lazarus' death. It would take a lot of patience and like humility on Jesus's end. I imagine having to kind of wait around with everybody for 4 days when it seems like what you just said didn't come true. I think that speaks to patience. And if I was in those shoes, I would probably be like, wait, guys, wait, just wait 4 days. You'll see. We'll see. I might want to like put out like a hint, like, or else I'd feel maybe awkward. So I just think that says a lot about his character,
Yeah.
being willing to be misunderstood. So
Yeah. That his entire ministry was nothing but him being misunderstood. I mean, right? And they all wanted him to be a warrior and kick out the Romans. And he's like, guys, that's not what's happening here. Okay. And yeah, you're right. And how did he also have the patience to not prevent Lazarus from dying? He didn't need to go there to make that happen. He healed people from afar before. He could have just said, and whatever, right? And he let it happen. You're right.
Also, I have a comment.
Yes.
Also, there's an old saying, especially in England, dead ringer. And when they bury people, they would put like a bell stick in the grave. And if he rang the bell, they buried him too soon. So it was like, it was called dead ringer in England.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all.
Oh, yeah. That's my son just said that's where the term saved by the bell comes from. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a true statement. Yeah.
Say by the
Okay.
bell and dead ringer. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. So that's where we go into the 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb, isn't just from a doctrinal standpoint. He really had to be in there that long. And it also doesn't add up as far as they have to bury him, then they have to gather the stuff, then they're going to go back. And then this other scene where they're like, he's already dead. We need to go make the tomb secure. If it was an 18-hour window from Friday night to Sunday before sunrise, that's just not enough time for all that stuff to happen. And yep. Well, okay. So Yeshua said to her, did I not say that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Do you know he had to ask for Lazarus to be resurrected? He had to ask God to do that. That's a connection, that echad, that one relationship that they have that's unbreakable, that he prayed and she said, I know that if you ask God, he'll do it. Right? Didn't she just say that? So maybe he was weeping because she actually had the level of faith that he was looking for. That he's looking for people. Remember when the centurion said, I command people, all you got to do is say the word and my servant will be healed. He's like, I haven't found faith like that in Israel. Maybe he loved him because of that. Yes, Marcin?
I realized that here that Yeshua hadn't commanded that Lazarus be resurrected yet, but he's already thanking Father that he has heard him. And then the next verse, he says that he's only speaking out loud so that the people would believe. So I think at this point, he had already like resurrected him in his spirit, like
Yeah.
through his connection to Father. And he's only speaking out loud for the people, like it says in the next verse.
Yeah, there's a lot of existentialism here because he's the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So his death and resurrection happened at the beginning of the world, but it also happened when it happened, and it also happened in past. So they don't live inside of time like you and me, right? So he's thanking him in the past tense for something that's about to happen because he has so much faith that his father's going to do it. Yeah. All right. Good. So they removed the stone. Yeshua, okay, Father, thank you. I knew that you always hear me because of the people standing around, and I said it that they may believe that you sent me. When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Okay. What is this foreshadowing? For the Lord will return with a shout, and the dead in Messiah will rise first. It's why we were so big into believing in the resurrection. The dead people are dead. Lazarus was absolutely dead and came out of the tomb when he heard the voice of the Messiah. When are all the saints going to come up out of the tomb? When the Messiah comes back on the clouds at the shout, at the last trumpet, and the dead in Messiah are raised and they rise to meet him in the air. And then at the end of the time, at Revelation 20, at the last half, at the very end, you're going to have another resurrection where this same thing happens. But this is going to be everybody who's ever lived who gets resurrected to be judged. None of this makes sense if people are judged when they die. If the judgment happens in when, right along, I mean, we are kind of judged while we live, right? But by skipping all that stuff and the resurrection and all those things about prophecy, you can see why people get so confused. Like they're looking to find out who the Prince of Gog is today. The Gog-Magog war is at least 1,000 years and 1 day away from today. It's not now. We're nowhere near the Gog war. You don't have to worry about that. right? Because it says the Gog war happens before the second resurrection, after the first resurrection, which you have to add 1,000 years to that because it's 1,000 year span in there. So the man who died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. And Yeshua said to him, unbind him and let him go. Isn't that something? Now, this week, they used AI and stuff to make the Shroud of Turin, right? What if the Shroud of Turin is this guy, not Yeshua? Because when Yeshua was resurrected, was killed, he was beat down. He was bloody, he was bruised, he was stabbed, he was messed up when he went to the tomb. Shroud of Turin guy doesn't look bad. Okay. Okay. Shroud of Turin guy doesn't look hurt at all. Yes, sir.
Actually, he looks pretty bad. Like, did you see his body? Because it's not just his face. Like,
Yeah.
there's like 600 wounds on him, and he has the crown of thorns. He has his side being pierced. He has like the nails in his
I
hand.
must have seen a different picture.
The AI thing might not be accurate.
Okay. 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 Yeah. All right. Anne-Marie?
I was going to say too, on the cross, he was beaten so bad, they tore his beard off. His face was disfigured, and the shroud he's got the full beard and everything. So how can that be?
Yeah. Apparently there's different pictures out there, so I should probably step aside. But the other part about it is that Yeshua, his bindings were different. Like the face cloth was left behind, but not the body. And in this case, the whole thing is intact. So, but either way, I mean, if the Shroud of Turin turns out to be real, that's pretty neat, right? Right. But blessed are those who believe without seeing, you know? So, so what else was I going to cover? Okay. So as far as the dead stuff, people being dead, in this case, they removed the stone, and the parallels between his death and Yeshua's death are pretty striking. He was also portrait white. Yes, you're absolutely right, Tiffany. The guy in the Shroud of Turin is like Keanu Reeves. It's not a Jewish man from the first century. It's a dude, right? So it looks more like a Spaniard, you know. So that's a problem. He is not a Semitic person. But you never know, right? And, so in Matthew 28:2, an angel rolled the stone away for Yeshua when he was resurrected, right? Did Yeshua need that? Did he need somebody to open the door for him? I don't think so. I don't think the guy who created the rock needed somebody to get the rock out of his way, right? Right? I think he could have just done the whole, but it was a thing of honor. When your king comes, you open the door for him. When you're right, you pave the way for him. So when he went into Jerusalem, they were putting down palm fronds. 3 days later, they're yelling, crucify him, right? Here, the angel of the Lord, Melech Yahweh, opens the door for him and he comes out. Same thing here. He could have just blasted the door open, right? That would have been pretty exciting, right? But he had them do the work. And they have, so that shows that we have something in it. We have something in this for us. Let's make him. Okay. The stone was rolled away for Yeshua to come out, not for Yeshua to come out, but for the Talmudim to go in. Okay. Yeah, that's true too. The stone was rolled away so that they could get in. It's a two-way door. Yep. No problem. Yes, April? Okay.
I think I'm ahead of you.
It could be out of order. I'm okay with it being out of order.
Because he said like,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
okay, then did y'all say that he actually used his name because anybody dead in the vicinity would be walking out.
Yeah, that
I
might
mean,
be
when
true.
you're resurrecting, the
Yeah.
resurrecting power of God
That's right.
is over this. You know,
That's a good point. Everett?
One of the accounts after Christ's resurrection has him basically coming through the walls of the house, without opening the door and coming in. So it's, the the roof around the cave or whatever it was hardly a hindrance. Certainly not the door.
Right. Right. He didn't need that at all. And he could have blown it up. He could have done whatever he wanted to do. But it happened the way it happened. And Lazarus, they have the stuff, moved. Acts 7, it is just to continue on our theme of death being sleep. Acts 7, 59 and 60. The screen is small, bear with me. So this is when Stephen is in front of the Sanhedrin and they're killing him for supposedly breaking Torah, which he didn't do, right? And they went on stoning Stephen, and he called on the Lord and said, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And falling on his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Having said this, he fell asleep. So this is two places now where we have it plainly. Now, to be straightforward, sometimes the Bible talks about dead people like they're still around. That does do that. And so you kind of have to weigh the options. But when they talk about it plainly, then this is what we get. Yes, ma'am.
well, sleep to a believer is rest. So that's why it would be characterized more like that. Maybe the other side of things aren't resting as well. I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm glad you said that because we're going to go to 1 Samuel 28:14. Now, this is when Samuel was killed and Saul lost his powers, and Saul wants his powers back. So Saul goes to the witch, the spirit medium, witch of Endor, and the witch of Endor actually can talk to the dead. I know a lot of people want to say this isn't real or he's only talking to a demon, but when Yahweh commands us not to talk to the dead, that probably means we can do it, right? He commands us to not do a lot of stuff that we can do. Okay. Okay. In fact, that's generally the rule of commandments. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. Not a lot of reason to have a commandment to not, jump off a cliff and fly because we can't, right? Right. So here that Saul it's working. And he says to her, what is his form? And she said, an old man is coming up and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and did homage. Saul is bowing to a dead spirit. That's pretty bad for the king of Israel. Okay. 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 He's bowing to somebody who's not Yahweh, right? Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I'm greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me. Now, this is the opposite of that perspective, I say. When Yeshua comes back, are we going to care about trivial matters? Saul is so selfish. He is so selfish that he's not saying, Samuel, my friend. He's not saying, help me. He's tied up in his minutia. I'm greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me, and God has departed from me and no longer answers me, either through the prophets or by dreams. Therefore, I've called you that you may make known to me what I should do. He's like, why then do you ask me, since Yahweh has departed from you and made your adversary? He's lost his mind. Saul has lost his mind because he's calling up God's prophet because God won't talk to him. Samuel's like, well, then I ain't going to talk to you either, right? Right? I'm not going to defy Yahweh. So, before going through this, it was the disturbed part. Whoops. Come back.
Can I
Yeah.
just say something real quick? Is this, I don't want to say it factually. Is this, I remember reading this at one point, really blowing my mind. Just this whole story here. Wasn't this during a time as well when Saul himself had outlawed speaking to mediums, like in Israel, and then he did it himself? I mean,
Yeah.
he went against his own decree, and yeah, that's just another detail I thought. It just speaks to his character. Speaking of that, it's like,
Yeah.
How do how do we know that it really was the actual spirit of Samuel? It doesn't, I mean, the Bible has a capital S there, like it's the one we know. How was it not just
So,
the
you know,
spirit world doing their thing?
when this was first taught to me, I was taught to doubt it as well. But just as reading it, I don't see any reason to doubt that this is Samuel, right? He's saying, well, right here is your proof for Jaden's proof is the woman said to him, behold, you know that's what Saul has done, how he has cut off those who are mediums and spiritists from the land. Why are you then laying a snare for my life and bringing about my death? Right? Because he's in a disguise, right? And so Samuel's like, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. That's the woman, right? And the king, don't be afraid. What's his form? Right? Don't be afraid. I'm taking, called you. So what do you ask for me? Since Yahweh has departed from you and become your adversary, Yahweh has done accordingly as he spoke through me. For Yahweh has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor. Right. So it just really looks like Samuel here. And Samuel, hey, he gets caught up. Hey, what's going on? Oh, wait, you want me to solve the problem for you? I'm Yahweh's servant, buddy. If Yahweh's not talking to you anymore, you're off limits, pal, right? And you're not getting anything from me. As you did not obey Yahweh and did not execute his fierce wrath on Amalek, so Yahweh has done this thing to you today. And now it goes on to where he gets the right answer. Moreover, Yahweh will also give over Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines. Therefore, tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Indeed, Yahweh will give over the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. So another departure from heaven and hell today. Samuel did not qualify to go in one direction. Saul did not qualify to go in the other direction. Okay. If Saul dies here, he's a condemned man. This is a guy who's condemned to the pit, where Samuel is a faithful prophet who deserves no punishment whatsoever. So he's saying, you're going to be with me, that they're going to be in the same place, in the same predicament, which we assume is death, right? So the Bible just makes a lot more sense if death is the opposite of life. Hopefully I made that clear. John 11. So, so we might go look at Ezekiel 37 later, but let's move on. 45 to 47. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw that what he had done believed him.
I
All
told him before I just had to leave like 2:15. So
All right.
thank you guys
Nice
so
to meet
much.
you, brother.
It was
All
really
right.
cool.
Hope to see you again. All right.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
No problem.
Yeah, can we both?
Bye, Chris.
Chris, that's right, JD. Good to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you guys. Bye-bye. All right. So, therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done believed in him. But some went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus has done. Therefore, the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council, saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. Can you believe that they made a committee to condemn a guy without involving the guy or investigating the guy? This is the most government thing I've ever seen in the Bible, right? We have this problem, and we need to solve this problem. Let's see if I can get you. Oh, there, I got you guys back. We have this problem and we need to solve the problem. And we're going to invite all of our bureaucrats and all of our teachers and all of our leaders, but we're not going to invite the guy to the meeting who actually can resurrect people. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like Congress having a meeting about government corruption, right? Right? They're having a meeting about government corruption here, being corrupted. Everett, go ahead.
It also shows the power of groupthink,
Ooh.
if you will. That people, unity is great, but if you're unified in the wrong direction, you get this perspective that, hey, we need to do whatever it takes to promote, promulgate, and protect ourselves. In spite of the obvious evidence that God was working through Yeshua, they recognized that he did fantastic things, but they didn't humble themselves to try to learn anything from it. They circled the wagons to try to protect themselves. It's truly amazing what human nature can do.
Harry?
They didn't want to lose their power. They had a cushy life, basically. They had people watching them and doing what they commanded them to do. And if they followed Yeshua, they would have to give up that power. Yeah. Yeah. Top down.
Top down? Yeah. All true.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you think at the meeting of killing the guy who just resurrected somebody, that somebody might have said, put up their hand and said, guys, he just healed everybody. He fed thousands of people. He resurrected a guy. What if he's not killable? Okay. Okay. That should have come up, right? If they're trying to kill a guy who has the power to resurrect other people, they should have taken Everett's cue and said, if God is with him, we better not even try this. This is not going to work out the way we want it to work out. And yet they persisted. Martin?
Well, Elijah was like calling down fire on like dozens of people until they gave up. And like here, Yeshua hasn't like killed anyone or called down fire. So maybe they thought they could get him.
They thought they could get him. That's a good point. He hasn't called down any fire. April?
Well, bringing it into our time on earth, we've come full circle to where in our century that our churches or our belief system is that dogmatic that it doesn't even occur because the theology is so structured of what you must believe and not. We don't even realize it as we're going. It's just solidified. The stumbling blocks are built into the building.
Right. Yeah. So I was talking last night they were talking briefly about the difference between Greek thinking and Hebrew thinking. We are so raised in a system that we don't realize we're in a system. That's our realm. If you investigate something, if you write a book, if you do anything, what format do we write everything in? Chronological format. That's our way of thinking. We start from A to B to C to D, and we want to emphasize something. We bold it, we underline it, right? They don't do that. We're part of a system from birth that we're not shaking, right? We can learn other things and we can move in a direction, but that's always going to be the case. Whenever I've ever had to investigate anything at work, and in one time I was falsely accused of discrimination at work, and all we had to do was put it in a timeline, right? I didn't know anything about this individual until long after the supposed crime, and I'm off the hook. Everything is timeline. We're Greek thinking, we're Western oriented, and that's the way it is. These guys aren't like that. The Bible isn't even written in order, Well, books aren't written in order. So, the next part is Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man die for the people and that the whole nation not perish." And then it says he didn't say this on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yeshua was going to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but in order that he may also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. This is the prime example of somebody being a prophet and having no idea that he's a prophet, having no being wicked. He's doing something awful, completely wicked, but it's still Yahweh's will. And this guy had no idea that he was doing that, and he was the high priest. So for God to speak through the high priest, it's not always good news. We don't always get good news from the prophets, right? And so this is pretty terrible what they're doing here. Beyond terrible. That they're convening. This is all of the priests and the Pharisees in a council, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order. All right, minutes from the last meeting. Yeah, we're still trying to kill that guy. Okay, where are we with trying to kill the guy? Okay, what did he do?" And they're openly having think of a Robert's Rules for Order city council meeting to murder somebody who hasn't done anything wrong. What worse thing could there be from that? And what is Satan? Satan was a murderer from the beginning. He was a liar from the beginning. They're completely playing a role that they think they're on the right side of history when they're completely wrong. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to say what you just said, that they had their justification, that they thought they were doing a righteous act to save the nation. Like, well, I mean, they had evil intentions, but they were justifying it.
Yeah. And that happens with all levels of sin, doesn't it? Don't we always talk ourselves into stuff that we shouldn't do? Not always, but when we fail, that's part of it, you know? So where's the part about the Romans? There's a part in here. I must have just read over it. For that, oh, right here. It says, "If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." So in order to prevent all men believing in Yeshua and Rome taking away their nation, they killed the Messiah, which resulted in all men knowing about Yeshua and Rome taking away their kingdom. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? That they were like, okay, our fix for this problem is in Yahweh. When we talked about the confidence earlier, the way Yeshua was confident that Lazarus was going to be resurrected, Yahweh put this plan in place 4,000 years prior to this. All these people, all of their beliefs, all of the influences on their psyche, all of their education, all of the input around them and their lives come up to this moment in time that they will make the decision to kill the Messiah was prophesied at the foundation of the world. How many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people were born and died in ancestries and crossing the Red Sea? You know, our fathers were under the clouds. This is another one of those moments where all of these people have, and with Roman army occupying, that's another pressure on them. They can't have Rome falling out about this because I don't know why they're worried about Rome, right? If Rome knew that they had a guy that could resurrect people, what would they have used the guy for? Invincible army, right? Right? They would have used him for their own thing. So this is something to where we have free will and we walk through life and we make decisions, based upon situations before us, but they're all influenced by our friends, our family, what we watch on television, what we listen to on the radio, how we were raised. So predestination and free will work together like a clock, like a mechanism in order to bring about God's ultimate will, was that his son would die innocently and be resurrected 3 days and 3 nights later. And these guys think that they're doing a good deed when they're doing evil. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. It's just amazing, the information that we're presented. So many few sentences, but so much information that we can get out of it. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Therefore, Yeshua no longer continued to walk publicly among the Jews, but went away from there to the country near the wilderness into a city called Ephraim, and there he stayed with his disciples. This is another sentence with another long story attached to it. Ephraim is a city which is in the former district of Ephraim. Remember, the tribes had their own apportionment. Ephraim and Manasseh are the tribes descended from the sons of Joseph who were pagan. His wife was the daughter of the pagan priests. Joseph's kids were mixed. Ephraim and Manasseh are often likened to us, to those of us who have converted, who've come out of paganism. Yeshua is turning his back on the Jews to physically go to Ephraim, means that this moment when they have crossed the threshold to kill him, he is accepting that decision, and he's showing that he's going to other people. Not turning his back on Jews completely. This isn't replacement theology, but it's pretty intriguing that that's where he goes. And these things are not accidents. When it talks about the cities and the names of the people and the players, they'll usually have double meanings. So the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before the Passover to purify themselves. So they were seeking for Yeshua and were saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think, that he will not come to the feast at all?" 2 more sentences with another big story. What does this show? If the Passover is near and the people of the surrounding districts are streaming into the temple in order to confess their sins and get right and get cleaned and get forgiven of any death impurity or anything like that, so they can participate in the Passover. This is showing us that the nation was absolutely faithful at this moment in time, that people were risking their lives by traveling in Rome-occupied Judea in order to get to the temple to be cleansed for the Passover. And the religious leaders just imagine them standing on the wall surveying the people, should have been happy. They should have been looking at that saying, "You guys, our synagogue system is working. Look at all of the faithful coming into the city to prepare for the Passover." They should have been praising Yahweh that they were part of a faithful nation. Instead, they were using it to sift out the guy they're trying to murder. Just crazy talk, okay? They're standing and setting up a filtration system to interview people coming into the system, coming into the city, coming in to go to God's temple and get purified for the festival. They're using that to try to kill a guy. That's horrible behavior. And yes, sir.
Just a small comment that Yeshua didn't need to be purified.
That's true. That's true. Oh, he did touch the dead guy, though. Just saying, right? Oh no, he just told him to come back to life. So they were seeking for Yeshua and were saying to one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think, that he will not come to the feast at all? They're counting on him being faithful to Yahweh to come into the feast so they can kill him. Terrible. And the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was to report it so they might seize him.